Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tatami, and here I talk about whatever I want to. Today it's time for the morning chop, and while I'm gonna do the morning chop, my first chop of the day, always a favorite, I thought I would talk about a quote that's been on my mind by Mother Zora Neale Hurston. Mother Zora wrote many books, but one of her more famous and commonly known is Their Eyes Were Watching God, and that is where this quote comes from. Um, if you are somebody who's trying to go back into African traditional religion, I might suggest purchasing her complete stories or Mules and Men. That might give you a more, it will enable you to look more into traditional Black American religious practices that are non-Christian or considered pagan, I guess, if we're going to use the English word for it. So today the quote is, half gods are worshipped in wine and flowers, but real gods require blood. Half gods, she's saying they're fine if all you ever give them is wine and flowers, the cute little trinkets, the little this and that. They'll be satiated with that. That will be fine. But real gods require blood sacrifice of some sort is the assumption, right? So I want you to think about that. Think about what religions that makes you think of, which practices this makes you think of. Who's the first people that come to mind, second people that come to mind when you think of a God that requires blood, and when you think of a God that requires only flowers, love, wine, those types of things. What practices come to mind with either of those things? Well, I never show you the bowl. It's pretty hefty, y'all. I'm out here doing like domers. I'm a pothead. Don't judge me. Nothing like the morning chop. Okay. Okay. So, when bloodthirsty gods are thought of, because of colonization, indoctrination, it's indoctrination, I think is the word. Because we're indoctrinated, because we're colonized, because we're Christianized, we're Europeanized. Often when people think of bloodthirsty gods, they think of sacrifice, Mayans maybe sacrificing humans, Africans sacrificing goats and chickens, just different images that have been used without context, often without real understanding of the religion. If you'll remember, a lot of the notes taken that our history books are based on was notes taken by colonizers who were just journaling, just trying to figure this shit out, because it was so vastly different from what they've been raised in. They'd never been raised in a society where like women could wear these types of things, where it was like the weather required you to wear these types of things, where the houses were built like this. There's a common story from the Mayan era where, the conquistadors thought that they had been given an entourage as a welcome because they were just so important, because they were just so amazing. And in reality, the Mayans had hired this entourage to follow them because they smelled so bad. Their city had like waterways. People cleaned 3-4 times a day, clean their clothes, clean themselves, clean the world around them. It's a very pristine environment. And these men just stank to high heavens. And that's why they had these people following them, was to continuously give a mist of a better smell, cover, like, they were holding herbs and stuff to try and make this entourage smell better. But in their journals, they thought that they were being treated like kings. So, I mean, just keeping in mind that that's a lot of the history we're reading about Indigenous people, is these people's very terrible interpretations of what was occurring around them actively in real time. We've got the Mayans, their people sacrifice. We've got Africans with animal sacrifice. We've got Middle Eastern people have had animal sacrifice. In fact, there's animal sacrifice in the Bible. and even a child sacrifice almost. Someone had to be willing to sacrifice their child, their own flesh and blood, not just a random child in the village, but their own actual child. And which I think I'd have a hard time either way. But, that's just me. But yeah, they had, they have all that in the Bible too. So it's nothing new. It's nothing that was just certain kinds of people of color. No, no, we got types of sacrifice all over the world, right? But one of the biggest forms of sacrifice that I've noticed that people just do not want to address is the level of bloodthirsty of the Abrahamic God. And I'm talking whoever the Christians are worshiping, the Catholics are worshiping, all of these other people. I've come to learn, when I was a little girl, I thought maybe we all did worship the same God, but with different religions. But I realized when I grew up that was a very Christianized this sort of view. It was a way of censoring ourselves and other people's religions, and the only way to humanize them was to believe that they believed what we believed, but just were practicing it a little differently than we were. And I realized I also was thinking this way because I wasn't really Christian, so I was justifying in my brain why it was okay that I was looking for something else, right? I was trying to find a excuse for myself. I didn't realize I didn't really need an excuse besides that feeling that I was not supposed to be doing this, adding to this. As hard as I tried very hard for a very long time, and it just never came to me. So I had to come to grips with that, right? That it wasn't really that wasn't a healthy way of thinking, and that way of thinking was my way of trying to leave without realizing, because we aren't all practicing the same things. The different entities give back different things, and Jesus and that God and all of that is just something that I just don't call upon in this house and bring in this house at all, because I just don't like that energy. So we have this issue of the Christian death toll, which is, I think, an obvious example of the bloodthirsty nature of a Christian God, right? Of the Christian God, is that of the Abrahamic God, should I say, because I'm pretty sure Muslim people believe they're praying to him. I think Jewish people also are all working within that same sphere with those same set of characters. And I'm sure they all have a death toll, but I'm, not this one. I'm going to just focus on, the Christian Catholic sphere of things, because that's more of what I'm familiar with here in this part of the United States, as an Afro-Latina, so I definitely, both sides of my culture, just genocide by Christians. There's no gentler way to put that. My Salvadoran side, genocide. My African side, genocide. They tried, and there have been, to this day, they keep calling us. So I know that constant need to kill is still there. It's still present, even if I feel like, even if they don't quite fully understand what they're adhering themselves to, there's clearly a lot of death. And so I'm not ever going to deny that, Christianity has taken, quite a bit of root in Africa. I think that is largely because once it enslaved the Africans then used it to fight back with their oppressors, right? That we kind of did similar here in America, but in Africa, it was like that a lot more. It was a lot more ingrained in the whole situation. So, I do understand why it's taken such root there. I do understand why it's so popular to believe that the original traditional indigenous beliefs were the wrong ones, were the backwards ones, were the ones that will get you killed. Because there is, that safety net that is put over people who decide to adhere to that really bloodthirsty thing. I mean, there's some people who are still sacrificable, obviously. I'm still not sure I completely understand why or what all this is about, but I do know that there is a serious situation with the Abrahamic God being pretty bloodthirsty. The numbers are shocking. The commonly cited is 50 million people dead because of Christians, for Christianity. They say if you go directly citing just people who directly, it was obvious they were practically proclaiming it before it occurred, that this was for Christianity, this was in the name of Christ, this is in the name of the Lord, what have you. It's 9 million to 26 million. So that's still pretty hefty numbers. That's for the peaceful religion with the Prince of Peace leading them. That is hefty numbers. Hefty numbers, okay? And then we've got, if we are to take into account just the people they killed just because of their lifestyle, their colonization, just them being around people that they shouldn't have been around, forcing their presence upon people, forcing their needs upon others, their lifestyle and whatnot, it goes up to 100 million. It's like 120 or 106 million, I think it was 106 million. That's incredible. That religion gets to be considered the peaceful religion. We're also peaceful. And how dare you if you say anything else about this bloodthirsty ass God. But yet, if you say, I practice hoodoo, voodoo, Ifa, candomblé, any African traditional religion, you will be derided as somebody who's trying to be with bloodthirsty gods, somebody who is trying to adhere to evil, trying to do some crazy shit, trying to go backwards, do some psycho. What's that more psycho than 106 million deaths? I'm sorry. That's a lot. That's a lot of people for a religion that touts the way it does and can be found on every block, but wants to talk shit about other people's religions. That's why I don't take it as seriously. It's, I'm grossed out by Scientology, but what is it but another form of Christianity? It's funny how other countries try and do what somebody else who has already been established did. And because they're beyond that beginning stage, they can kind of talk shit and be like, oh, you shouldn't do that. But how did you get here? How'd you get here? How'd you get this big? How'd you get this rich? Because it wasn't through philanthropy, nice shit going on. It was through murder, theft, land theft. It was through forced conversion, genocide. So it's just like, y'all had a really steady foundation on death and stuff, and then you get to be really critical of religions who still sacrifice chickens for initiation. You know what I'm saying? But your God still clearly requires blood, because we still see it. It's still disproportionate. There's still this need to kill like that. And I think it found its haven ground here in America for a little while. Hopefully, with the return of other people to more indigenous practices that honor the earth and honor everything as, as one, as equal in a lot of ways, and understand spirituality and the hierarchy of things, as we come to go back to that, and not just be like, oh, humans are the best and certain humans are the bestest than others. It derailed so much. I always try and think like, what could the world have been if instead of a Christian religion that dictated you were the owner of nature and that it was all there for you to use, divine, manifest destiny, all that bullshit. What could it have been if an indigenous religion had taken over? If a nature-based, a nature venerating, we probably wouldn't have all these problems, even with all the people we have. There's benefits, some benefits to this society, but there's a lot of drawbacks. And anyways, I was thinking about bloodthirsty gods, and I thought of the Abrahamic God and all of my people who had to die because he whispered in the ear of people who thought that they were doing something holy. You know what I'm saying? And one of my biggest pet peeves is people who will be like, they're not Christian. That's not a real Christian. Like, come on, skip to the end, because at the end of the day, you all were reading the same book and somehow, like I said, spread the whole wide world over and did the exact same bullshit everywhere you went. spread the exact same depraved bullshit everywhere that was went. And then it's like you got newcomers and they want to feel good about like what they're doing, but you got to accept the bad. And the bad is that the Christian doctrine, the Abrahamic doctrine overall can be so misinterpreted that a whole bunch of crazy can occur. And there's never any room for criticism or growth. We all just have to denounce that person as non-Christian, accept that shit, and applaud it for what? Applaud it for what? Your God is bloodthirsty. He's killed a lot of people, and you know, or rather, you've sacrificed a lot of people to him, and it continues to this day. And it shocks me that Christians think that they're under attack. It beyond, it's like that meme with the kid with his like the boot, but his hand is in the boot, so it's like it's your own hand, it's your own boot. No one else is out here oppressing you. You haven't experienced oppression. You wouldn't know oppression if it slapped you in the face, but you out here thinking like people not saying Merry Christmas is oppression. Because I have the right to not say Merry Christmas anymore. Because I have the right to not invoke those gods in my home, those spirits, whatever, in my home anymore. That's oppression to the Christian people. So I don't like it. Anyways, that was the quote for today. That was what was in my mind. On my mind was that half gods are praised in wine and flowers, but real gods require blood. Because I remember how bad, you know, I know how bad people get it when, oh my God, my lip is just so like dry. I know how bad people get it when they're trying to be an African traditional religion, saying they sacrifice, and people are like, Jesus was the sacrifice, but yet and still there's a lot of bloodshed going on, a lot of blood sacrifice going on long after Jesus, if he was the sacrifice, because they're looking for something that's obvious like everybody else is, you know, they're like, that's a symbolic blood, that's this, that's that. But really what they're doing is invoking with those traditions of the Catholics with the drinking the blood and the flesh and blah, blah, blah. Christians do it often with the prayer. They're invoking this type of behavior, you know what I'm saying? And so for them, it's easy to be like, oh, you shouldn't kill a chicken. Oh, they found the bones of a young girl in this ancient civilization. How dare they? But yet and still there's just plenty of murder and mayhem for them to point to actively for Christians. And it's never on the table. And the rest of us have to kind of dismiss it. They're always innocent. They're under attack. Meanwhile, we're actually under attack. Meanwhile, we can actually get fired. People can actually try and harm us. People will actually try and turn communities against us, get our kids taken away, get us kicked out of our homes, because they sense that we are pagan, as they call it in the English language. Non-Christian is basically anybody who's non-Abrahamic in faith is pagan. If you're not Muslim, you're not Jew, you're not Christian, you're not Catholic, you're not any of the billion sects of Christian, you're pagan. And you're evil, and you're liable to get discriminated against. But somehow Christians think they're the ones suffering because we're just not praying to their God. And so, yes, anyways, that's my thoughts. There are, like, of course, there is sacrifice in other people's religions, but I did want to focus today on what I think is probably one of the more bloodthirsty gods people pray to en masse today. Probably the most. Like, with how many people pray to this dude and adhere to this, but yet have such a history. Long after the ultimate sacrifice was made with Jesus.